Alright, hey, so this video I'm gonna talk about Rainmaker, and the kind of various dynamics of the mode. Rainmaker is probably my favorite mode, um, and I'm always thinking about how I can improve my gameplay and game plans around the mode. And generally, my style is I end up being the one on the team that grabs the Rainmaker just because I'm typically playing a supportive role on the team. Um, and so, yeah, I'm always thinking about how can I improve this in the game plan and stuff. I think Rainmaker generally gets a bit of a bad rep in the competitive community just because it's quite a volatile game mode. Um, other modes have their snowballs, but I think I think Rainmaker is probably the mode where um, keeping a lead is feels the least guaranteed, um, and especially in this game and in previous games, you can lose the game very quickly to team wipes and without QR, and so yeah, as much as Rainmaker has, as much as other modes have this sort of comeback potential and the snowball potentials, I think Rainmaker generally gets a bad rep just because of its volatility. But I do think that a lot of people um, miss out on opportunities where they can be a bit more consistent in their gameplay. I think that even at high level, I see a lot of mistakes in Rainmaker or plays that don't feel very refined. So I think there's a lot of potential for improvement. And I kind of just want to talk through some of my thoughts around that. And maybe people can understand their game plans better, and yeah, win their matches better. Um, just for this video, last video I went off a bit of a script. This video I'm kind of just discussing my thoughts as they come. I mean, I've got notes with me, but it'll be a bit more conversational. I probably don't sound as robotic, hopefully. And yeah, I'll try to also accompany what I'm saying with some visual gameplay as well. But I'll try my best to explain things as clearly as possible, in words as well, so that the gameplay isn't sort of crucial. So yeah, I'm not going to talk about how Rainmaker works. I'm not going to talk to you about how a pop works and what these checkpoints are. I'm going to assume you know how the mode just works at a basic level. But the big difference, I think, with Rainmaker, and why I find it so interesting is, but a big difference between other modes, that is that the Rainmaker objective is so dynamic. So with a mode like Splat Zones, you've kind of got your dedicated area, your dedicated zone, that you have to control, and that doesn't change at all. And with tower control, as much as the tower does move, it has a set path and it has set checkpoints that it ends up the objective itself isn't as dynamic. Whereas Rainmaker, and even Clams as well, has quite a dynamic objective. I can grab the Rainmaker here, but I could take it all the way over here if I wanted. Don't know why you do that, but you can. And I could take it all the way across the map over here. And I haven't barely made any points. So yeah, I think the dynamics of Rainmaker is really interesting, but I also think that lends to the game mode being difficult for people to create refined game plans around. With modes like Zones and Tower Control, you can kind of, or every time you sort of approach the objective, you're generally approaching it from the same points and from the same defensive options, offensive options, the same sort of positions on the map. Whereas Rainmaker has a bit more choice, and Rainmaker forces you to adapt a bit more because of that sort of dynamic. But I think better play can come from people taking advantage of this sort of freedom to express positions and different types of game plans to I think people can improve their gameplay through thinking about those sort of things a bit more. So I'm kind of here to just discuss that. So one thing I wanted to mention early on is the difference between Splatoon 3 and Splatoon 2's Rainmaker. I think Rainmaker in the previous game was very poor. Now, I didn't play comp Splatoon in Rainmaker, or in Splatoon 2, but from my understanding, it was kind of, you have special like armor, and you had GG specials like Stingray, which I don't think were super beneficial for the mode. I don't think it created a super healthy game. And as well with Splatoon 3, there's now the addition of like checkpoints. Most maps have 2 checkpoints, some maps have 1. But generally, I think checkpoints are quite healthy in that it gives a bit more, breaks up the game a bit more in that you kind of got to go through these checkpoints at some point. It restricts your offensive positioning a bit, and makes defending a little easier, but it also prevents stuff from like a wipe at the start of the map and suddenly losing 30 points or whatever it is and getting KO'd off of one wipe. So it brings a bit of a safety net into the mode as well. The other thing that I think Rainmaker benefits from is Tactical. So Tactical, obviously, I mean, the two main things is the sort of speed buff and is the QR special saver buff that it gives you. And the important thing is that the Rainmaker carry can receive these buffs while holding the Rainmaker. So if I were to push with the Rainmaker, or rain out, but I would have the speed buffs activated, which means I'm more likely to gain points quicker when I'm trying to push, and as well with the QR benefits, if I'm trying to gain points and I get splattered, the downside to and the disadvantage created from a teammate going down and getting splattered is lessened because of the QR and special saver benefits. So I think as well. I think the more significant benefit of Tactical though is from a defensive point of view. A defending team with Tactical is a lot less susceptible to team wipes. If your whole team wipes but everyone has Tactical, instead of being down for 8 seconds, you're down for like 4 seconds or whatever it is, which can, in such a fast mode like Rainmaker, can be a big thing over the course of a match. So yeah, there's Tactical is a bit of a safety net, and it makes team wipes a lot less devastating. Generally, you don't want a team wipe, but it makes it less volatile for sure. And the other thing, I think this game has a few more high DPS offensive specials than the previous game, which I think benefits Rainmaker as well, because it's easier to defend the Rainmaker with an offensive special that can quickly kill the Rainmaker. And I think there's a lot more specials with high DPS options, so even weapons with low DPS can still have an impact on the objective with their special. Stuff like Tri-Strikes, Zuka, Splashdown, or Triple Splashdown, Hammer, they all have a lot of DPS on the Rainmaker, and I think are generally better specials for the mode compared to Splatoon 2. But again, I didn't play Splatoon 2 competitive, so those are just my base thoughts. I'm not sort of stating any sort of hard facts. But yeah. So the one thing I wanted to, the sort of key way I think about Rainmaker is that the one in control of the Rainmaker weapon is the one in control of the state of the game. I mean, you can take that as the individual player, or you can take that as the team in control. But the player in control effectively can choose wherever they position. And wherever they position forces the defending team to react to that and position themselves. It's sort of like, like with any other mode, if you're in control of the objective, you can force certain play out of the opponent. But I think with Rainmaker, there's a lot more. There's a lot of options that people don't consider. So one of those options, for example, is if I control the Rainmaker. Oh, apologies if my movement is a little off. I'm playing with a delay. But if I control the Rainmaker, one of the most basic choices is which checkpoint do I go to, for most maps at least. And different checkpoints have different benefits and dynamics to them. Another choice, or other sort of more complex choices, is where do I shoot the Rainmaker shots? Where do I, even if I'm not going directly for a checkpoint, how do I approach the checkpoint? Do I approach it from here? Do I approach it like from a more middle area, or do I approach it more from the side? And stuff like your positioning behind cover and your pathing around obstacles, like say this one on left side Hagglefish, are all choices that you can make to change the decision making of the defending team. Let's go into depth about some of these checkpoints. I'm going to use Hagglefish as an example, but you can kind of apply a lot of this thinking to any of the other maps with checkpoints, or even with just different Rainmaker paths in general. So I'll go through the Hagglefish example. If people find it helpful, I'm open to doing a video that goes into every map. But I think the general ideas you can adapt to other maps pretty easily. Sorry. So one of the things with the choice of checkpoints is, if you control the Rainmaker, you get to choose how your team pushes and how the opponents defend, in terms of where they position. So let's take this checkpoint, for example, the middle one on Hagglefish. You have to be careful for people sort of up on the plat. You have to be careful for people up in the top left tent. You have to be careful for people top right tent, and even that sort of grates near the rail in spawn. If we take it to the left, though, there's different options. You still have to be careful of the tent and a bit of plat, but you have to now care for this sort of left side, but you don't have to care for the top right tent as much. So these sort of whichever checkpoint you choose forces the defense to go to either one of those setups. And either one of those setups you could plan in advance to capitalize off of. I generally think that the right checkpoint on Hagglefish is more difficult to get because there's so many angles that you have to watch. This is almost like a 180 degree that you have to be aware of potential threats just to get the checkpoint. Whereas bottom left is a lot. There's a lot less areas to clear, and a lot less space for a defending team. So you can capitalize off of that by, say, I don't know, you might want to use Booyah Bomb to clear the tent and Inkjet over the ledge or something. Depending on, what your weapon comp is, and how you want to approach the strategies of pushing, the choice in checkpoint is actually quite important. The other thing I wanted to note is the distances between the checkpoints, or the distance to the checkpoint and distance between the checkpoint. So the Rainmaker spawns here, and at least for Hagglefish, the right checkpoint is slightly faster to get to than the left checkpoint. I think it's about 1 second faster, but like generally it is easier to get to the right checkpoint. Which means that, say you team wipe at the start, you can break the checkpoint fairly quickly. And those understanding the distances is important for if you have an opportunity for breakaways, which is the quickest path that's going to get you the quickest points. However, understanding the distances between the enemy checkpoints and your checkpoints is also an important factor. Hagglefish is really easy to demonstrate this because between the checkpoints you kind of just walk through where the Rainmaker spawns, like between this right checkpoint, the enemy's right checkpoint here, and your middle one that you're defending. Because you're kind of going through here, it's if you, as the Rainmaker, get this checkpoint for the enemy, when the enemy tries to push back in, let's say they splat one or two of your teammates and you have to defend now, and now they're in control. It is because you took the shorter path or the shorter checkpoint. It is also quicker for the enemy to counter push. It is quicker for them to get to the middle of the map. And so from here, it is quicker to then get to your short checkpoint or your long checkpoint, compared to if you took the left checkpoint on Hagglefish. It's I think it takes an extra second or so. It means that it actually takes an extra second for the opposing team to retaliate a counter push. So understanding the distance between your the enemy checkpoints and your checkpoints can be quite important when you're considering how easy it is for the enemy team to counter push. That sort of thinking is similar to the line of thinking for stalling, which I'll get into later. But generally, when you try to stall the Rainmaker, you're trying to maximize the distance the enemy team has to go if they were to counter push. You don't want to stall right next to your pedestal, because then they can instantly KO if they kill you. But if you're trying to stall all the way in their base, it takes forever for them to make a counter push, even if you go down. So that sort of distance thinking is quite important, and it's important for your choice of checkpoints, the enemy's choice of checkpoints, and where you choose to position the Rainmaker. One sort of last thing is your choice of, you can, let's say you're getting pushed, and you're probably going to go down as the Rainmaker, like, you know, all your team dies, like, you're kind of left alone. You can choose to put the Rainmaker in a slightly worse position for the enemy to counter push by taking it further away from your checkpoints. That might just be to the edge of the map. You might, you know, if you were, say here under 10, you might drop it below the ledge, and like all of a sudden that's extra work for the enemy to make when they counter push. Yeah, I'm going to quickly go to Rainmaker Manta for this next section. Now I'm going to Rainmaker Manta just because I like this map. I don't think it's a great Rainmaker map, if I'm being honest. But there is something that I want to demonstrate, and part of the reason that I like this map is this kind of strategy and positioning. But I want to quickly demonstrate that how you can effectively push with the Rainmaker weapon. I think a lot of teams have the bad habit from Splatoon 2 that they don't recognize that the Rainmaker weapon can be used effectively to help in a push offensively. Especially with armor in Stingray in Splatoon 2, armor meant that the Rainmaker weapon itself was less valuable. You know, it was less likely to get a kill because of armor. And grabbing the Rainmaker was generally risky if the enemy team had Stingray, because Stingray was just a free way to kill the Rainmaker and stall. But in this game, those things don't exist. So I think teams can benefit from knowing the dynamics of the Rainmaker weapon as well, and how to help the team push with it. So the Rainmaker weapon, you have a charge up, you shoot this sort of arc shot, and the explosion is kind of like a suction bomb explosion with the detonation time of a splat bomb. So it's actually quite significant. It's kind of like you know, a Sub-Saver Splattershot Junior that's just throwing splat bombs kind of thing. It has quite significant sort of paint output, and can provide chip damage. So it has significant offensive options that can be used for helping in pushes. You can also think of them similar to the sort of tri-strikes. They don't destroy objects nearly. It doesn't destroy objects nearly as quickly, but the explosion it creates can be sort of similar in size as well. A great thing about the Rainmaker 2 is that it can, with its arc shots, it can arc over walls and clear areas that your teammates might have difficulty clearing, especially with its range. Obviously the Rainmaker is vulnerable, so you don't want to like frontline with it, but it can kind of be used sort of like as, you know, a support junior or a sort of X-Blosher kind of weird hybrid. Yeah, it's also quite strong at the sort of charge time and the detonation time work well together. That it's quite strong at spamming a point. It's difficult to, if someone's trying to move where I'm shooting, it's difficult for them to time safely moving through, especially if you've got teammates there. Like, it'll do chip damage almost guaranteed. So the Rainmaker weapon is quite effective at spamming choke points. And the one thing I wanted to show on Rainmaker Manta is this position here. The Rainmaker is really good at spamming over walls, and so you can actually clear bunker really effectively when you're standing on this kind of right plat area. And that means that when your teammates, if you're spamming this area and your teammate wants to push bunker, they have the support of paint being thrown down and damage being thrown around, so that if someone drops on them, um, you know, the enemy team doesn't want to drop on them from that position. The other broken thing about this spot is not only you can spam over bunker and create opportunities for your teammates, you can spam this right checkpoint here, and it's very difficult for the enemy to push towards you just due to the nature of the map layout. You also have this cheeky cover, which, you know, there's very few weapons or specials that will actually be able to splat you from this position. So, yeah, obviously the obviously the Rainmaker weapon is slow as well, so you want to keep that in mind when you are pushing. But yeah, I think people lose out on. People just think you want to run the Rainmaker as quickly as you can, or they don't know how to correctly shoot their Rainmaker shots to force the enemy out of positions safely, or to get a kill, which means that people's pushes ends up not being as effective as I think they could be. It's very rare, I think, in high level. I mean, I think it comes down to, as the higher up you get, the better players are at dealing with these sort of things, and just fighting in general. But you rarely see a like strong Rainmaker carrier. You rarely see a Rainmaker carrier that is sort of outstanding. So yeah, I think that's just something to keep in mind. That it's sort of, those are my thoughts on the Rainmaker main weapon, or Rainmaker weapon itself. Let me take a quick drink. Okay, so next I wanted to talk about how the two ways that I view you can create a push on Rainmaker. So the two ways I view it is, you can have the Rainmaker go in front of your team, or you can have your team go in front of the Rainmaker. What I mean by this is, let's say I'm trying to get this left checkpoint on Meta Maria, and if I were the Rainmaker, I could just gun the checkpoint and probably get splattered, but I might be able to get the checkpoint. But the act of the enemy splatting you is a reaction to the Rainmaker pushing forward. It's just a very basic example. The Rainmaker going ahead of the team means that it's a lot easier to bait the Rainmaker objective into forcing the enemy to make certain plays. So if I gun it for this checkpoint, it's going to force the opposing team to shoot me, really, if they're not trying to lose. Now there's quite significant cover here on Rainmaker Manta at the left checkpoint, so that's not super risky for the defending team. But on other map modes, that's not necessarily the case, and you might have weapons that can capitalize off of this defensive positioning on Rainmaker Manta. I don't know, you might have a blaster that can shoot around this sort of street corner. And so that's the general idea behind the Rainmaker going in front of the team. It's important to note that generally this is not considered the strategy that you want to. It's generally considered the worst strategy, I guess. In my head, it's more of a specific game plan strategy, because it's a little more. It's a little more sort of uncertain, I think, and also if your Rainmaker gets splattered, it stalls your push significantly. Like the Rainmaker has to like do its little respawn animation, and then it has to, like, the shield comes up, and then you've got to pop the shield, and then someone's got to grab it again. And so I think Rainmaker in front of your team strategies generally will revolve around ways of creating high DPS on the Rainmaker shield, whether that be through specials or through main weapons. Stuff like Sploosh, Hammer, Tristrikes, Blob, Hydra. I don't know. All those things have high DPS and can win the DPS war even in player disadvantage when your Rainmaker carry goes down. And the Rainmaker pop itself can be, if you can create a quick pop, it can be difficult for the enemy team to avoid the Rainmaker pop and create advantages through that. And if you have QR and you're the Rainmaker carrier, or say cooler, and you die, you can come back quickly, and the player disadvantage that you inevitably force is not as drastic. It's also not a bad strategy if the enemy team has difficulty stopping a push. So if I'm trying to push through this left street on Rainmaker Manta, this kind of choke point here, if they have weapons with high turf, high rates of fire, bombs, even toxic mist, or just like specials that Crab has insane fire rate, all those sorts of things create some sort of lethal force that prevents you from pushing forward. If your enemy team doesn't have those tools, let's say that they have a charger, which if they miss their shots they have to charge up again, or they have a slow main weapon like H3 or 96, or a range blaster or something like that, then pushing forward can actually get you a lot more points than expected, just due to the enemy team comps. And the enemy team comp doesn't have a lot of popping power. Again, you can play towards the repop strategy, and controlling the space through that way. The slightly more consistent strategy, and probably the one I recommend, is, and what generally most people recommend, is having your team go in front of the Rainmaker. Again, the Rainmaker, like, the movement sucks, you don't want to be frontline with this thing. So generally having your teammates in front of you to clear the space forward is the better strategy. And if as the Rainmaker carrier you have a completely safe path, you're just getting 3 points. Sorry. Let me look at my notes. This is, I think, an important thing as well. If the enemy has Tacticooler, if the enemy has Tacticooler and your front lines are able to clear, typically if let's say you get a team wipe, like, awesome, you want to gun it as the Rainmaker. If they have Tacticooler though, and they're all cooled up and they respawn really quickly, you might actually, like, might probably want to push forward a little bit, but you might want to not completely gun it. You might want you to wait for your frontline teammates to take space forward, because the enemy will respawn quite quickly. I think as well, this sort of team in front of the Rainmaker strategy is important, because if you can successfully, let's say the enemy team has cooler and you kill them and you're continuing your push, if you're able to chain a second wipe or set of kills, it stops it. Typically, because of the pace of Rainmaker, it's difficult for a defending team to get a second Tacticooler up, which means that that chain of kills and that second set of kills that you get will be not cooled, and so that creates a much larger opportunity for a big push. I think it's important to note I think it's important for people to consider that sort of strategy is important for people to consider as well, because It's the strategy that is forced upon you when you're in overtime. When you're in overtime, let's say you don't have checkpoints, or sorry, let's say you've broken through a checkpoint and you're just trying to get lead. Your Rainmaker can't die. So the sort of feed the Rainmaker into repop, into feed the Rainmaker high DPS strategies with QR don't work in overtime. So you need to be open to understanding how your team should be pushing, with the goal of prioritizing the Rainmaker's life. Because if you need a certain lead, a strategy where the Rainmaker dies is not an option. And so overtime pushes kind of force that the Rain or team in front of the Rain play style. So I think every team composition should have some sort of game plan around how to push at a slower pace, and push with the goal of prioritizing the Rainmaker's life. Now I think best, even though I've created those two distinct, I guess, strategies, those are kind of just the two ways that I think about the types of pushes that can come out of Rainmaker. But generally, the best pushes are some in between of the two. I think the most effective pushes generally come out of if I pick up the Rainmaker. In my opinion, best pushes come out when you are needing to create some sort of advantage, whether that be player advantage or whatever, or special advantage. And so you as the Rainmaker need to have an understanding of how to stall and live until your team is able to create advantage. Whether you can create advantage through the Rainmaker weapon and just fighting capabilities, or you stall long enough until one of your teammates gets a special. Then once one of those two advantages is created, then you can push forward with the Rainmaker. You might even choose, if you say you're cooled, you might choose to feed it with the team, or to feed in front of the team, and purposely die, and then your team has a, let's say they have a high DPS special of like, I don't know, splashdown, then they can repop and continue that sort of cycle. And similar sort of thinking can be done with like strategies like vacuum, ink vac. Ink vac, if you have a teammate that is going to ink vac in front of you and is going to protect you as the Rainmaker as you're pushing forward, the ink vac can't stand in front of you, so you've got to gun it in front yourself. And so being able to stall the Rainmaker, and wait for those special opportunities is quite an important skill, in my opinion. So yeah, some sort of flow between that Rainmaker in front of the team and team in front of the Rainmaker is really important. And again, if you're in control of the Rainmaker, you have the capability to force reactions upon the opponents. So if just in general, if part of your strategy is to force the opponents to shoot at you, the Rainmaker, so that your team can then shoot at them while they're distracted on you, that is a perfectly valid strategy. Controlling the Rainmaker, I think, is an incredibly sort of important aspect of the mode, and how you choose to force reactions out of the enemy team should be at the center of any sort of pushes, or at least is the center of how I think about a lot of these pushes. So yeah. So my next sort of just discussion is less so on big pushes, just kind of on a bit of the nitty gritty niche aspects of Rainmaker. So, excuse me. One thing I want to talk about is just bombs. Bombs are really quite useful in Rainmaker. If you, I might actually change quickly to a bomb weapon. Bombs, lethal bombs especially, not so much like splash bombs or, I mean, not so much burst bombs or torpedo, but they're still useful. Bombs are insanely useful in this mode. Not only do they have a high amount of damage that you can apply to the Rainmaker shield, but a high amount of burst damage. The bombs provide a lethal source that can prevent the Rainmaker from moving forward, especially on defense. As well, bombs will explode on impact for the Rainmaker, so you can actually get kills off of that. They can be extremely useful for, let's say the Rainmaker has quite a lot of range, right? And most weapons don't outrange it. So bombs can be useful for contesting the Rainmaker at a safe distance. Especially with Rainmaker's limited mobility. It can't really paint for itself, and it makes you like 10% slower or whatever it is, and you can't like substrafe, and generally the mobility is limited. If you are throwing a ton of bombs at it, it just like limits its mobility even more, and there's decent odds that if you are throwing lethal bombs at it continuously, you might kill the Rainmaker and give you even more stalling time. Yeah, so the bombs are incredibly useful. So generally picking weapons with lethal bombs as a sub-weapon is something important. Stuff like point sensor doesn't really help you when the Rainmaker's just gutting it. But if you can throw a bomb in their path, then they've got to hesitate, they've got to paint over the bomb and then continue. That's why the really annoying, it's less annoying now with patches, but LDE suction bombs, just like spamming, you have multiple teammates spamming a choke point like the Rainmaker checkpoint, is just super annoying. So yeah, the more bombs you can put on a team, generally the better. There's strategies you can incorporate, and weapons you can incorporate that, like, not every weapon has to have a bomb. I'm not gonna sort of put a hard, strict rule on it, but generally bombs are good for this mode, and they're good in general. One of the things I wanted to touch on was how to stall. I know a lot of teams don't like to stall, and people don't like getting stalled on, but it's a skill that wins you games sometimes. So I think it's important for people to know how to recognize stalling opportunities. And yeah, so generally, typically a team will want to stall the Rainmaker in the last minute of gameplay. The Rainmaker has a 60-second timer, as you can see, and so you want to grab the Rainmaker at a point where, if you were to continue holding the Rainmaker for the rest of the match, and the match ended, you would still be holding the Rainmaker. This is just, it's just generally, like, it's kind of just a general rule of thumb, just because it means you don't have to worry about the Rainmaker's death and a repop and like understanding that sort of thing. If your timer runs out, as you've seen in this video, you're gonna explode, and the Rainmaker will either reset where you exploded or in the middle. And so teams can, if you pick it up at the wrong time, teams can play around the fact that the Rainmaker is going to explode and reset in some way, so the enemy team doesn't have to use up resources in trying to splat you. So that's the benefit of picking up after that, like in the final minute. Yeah. So generally with stalling, it's very map dependent. I've gone to Scorch Gorge here because I feel like this probably has the easiest example to show. You can stall on every map to various sort of viabilities. Like certain maps have stronger stalling spots than others. Generally, what you want to do is you want to find positions on the map near the 100-point mark, 100-point Rainmaker mark. So somewhere typically in mid. You might, and generally you want to move the position of the Rainmaker as far away from either the checkpoint. Mark is online. As far as away from your checkpoint or far as away from your pedestal, depending on the state of the game. Another benefit, another thing to consider when positioning is you want an area that you can effectively spam. Like I said before, it's very difficult for people to move through these Rainmaker shots if you time them really well. So you want to find an area that it is difficult for the enemy to get close to, because you can spam certain sections. So even if an enemy does rush you down, you can splat them and stay alive. What else is there? Stall, when you're stalling, especially if you're stalling for like the entire minute, you will be baiting out lots of resources effectively. You'll be baiting out lots of bombs and probably a lot of specials. They will, if you are if you're grabbing it in the final minute, the enemy has to splat you in some way before time runs out. So they've got to expend their resources to try to splat you. And so when you effectively bait out those specials, your teammates can play around that by positioning themselves to take advantage of that play by the opponents. Or if all of a sudden they start using Zuka and they're trying to cross map kill you, your teammates, can take advantage of that by, say, rushing the Zuka down, or trading out a splat. In which case, like, you want your teammates to capitalize off of it in some way. You don't want your teammates to just like sit there. What you definitely don't want to do is have your teammates die alongside you. And the reason for that is because if you're as the Rainmaker, you're going to bait a lot of specials. And good odds, due to limited mobility, all that good stuff, if the opponent uses enough resources, you're probably going to get splatted. But that doesn't mean that you can't, that your positioning, that is the point where your positioning can come into play. Because even if you get splatted, the enemy team have used so many resources to splat you, and perhaps your teammates have capitalized off of their positioning, that now you can just have someone else re-grab the Rainmaker and continue to stall. You want your teammates to stay alive because if you wipe, then the enemy team has free space to then grab the Rainmaker and set up their own push, just like set up an overtime push. So I've been standing here on this fog rates, but for Scorched Gorge, at least sometimes you can. It says don't retreat here, but sometimes you can. If you're coming from a spawn enemy push, you can drop down into here. In which case, the do not retreat sort of thing won't appear. And this this sort of bottom area is extra good because it is easy access for your team to safely defend. If your team is your team can pretty much sit in base and like keep shooting at the Rainmaker. So it's very accessible. It's a very accessible position on the map for your team, but it's a very inaccessible spot for the enemy team. And it is quite far away from checkpoints and the final pedestal. Like they've got to go all the way around, pretty much. So yeah, this bottom right area on Rainmaker Scorchers is quite strong. And again, there's similar areas on other maps that you can pull it off. You can pull off Stolen on almost any map. The final, oh, not quite the final thing, but like one of the concepts I wanted to talk about is this sort of concept of death stalling. So let's say there's a couple instances where this can come up. One of those instances, let's say you're trying to stall a Rainmaker. It's the last minute. You go all the way on the far right of Scorch Gorge and you're spamming this choke point. Let's say now you've baited out specials and you die to a Zuka shot or something. Look, there we go. I've just died to a Zuka shot. Yeah, and so the Rainmaker's gonna respawn, or the Rainmaker's gonna spawn its shield where you've died. And depending on the position of where you've stored the Rainmaker, the enemy team will either want to immediately grab it. It also depends on how much time they have. They'll either want to immediately grab it, or they want to repop very quickly so that the Rainmaker can start its 15-second timer until it resets to mid. The resetting to mid thing is only really done when the Rainmaker's in such an, like, you've put the Rainmaker in such an atrocious position that someone diving in to grab the Rainmaker and then come out safely is quite risky for the enemy team, so they'd rather have the extra player up to help protect the Rainmaker so that it can reset, so that they can grab the Rainmaker in a safer spot. But if you put it in one of those annoying positions, I'm going to use this far right area as the example, but you can do this in the bottom right, like I was talking about before. If you've got the Rainmaker in a really annoying position and the enemy team wants to reset the Rainmaker, you can effectively death stall, and while the enemy team is waiting for the Rainmaker to reset, you can dive for the Rainmaker, grab it, and reset the reset timer. So by grabbing here, even if you die immediately, it stalls the state of the game a little bit longer because it forces the enemy team to splat you, then for the Rainmaker to respawn its shield, and then for the enemy team to repop the shield, and then the 15-second timer starts again. So that can be, those sort of precious seconds can be quite valuable stall, especially if you're, say you're last alive, or all your teammates go down and you're like, okay, we just need to buy like an extra second. There's a lot of niche cases. I won't go through all of them because I think it's quite a difficult concept to say, like, oh, this is the best time to do it, and you want to do it here, and like depends on the map and all that sort of stuff. But just I want to give I want to sort of demonstrate that idea, and so hopefully people can sort of adapt that to other situations. Generally death stalling is done with a lot of, like, with the intent of stalling, but there's, oh, sorry, let me rephrase this. Death stalling can come up in non-stall cases. I've been talking about like the last minute of the match when you're just trying to like stall the Rainmaker at a really annoying position, and so you might death stall to keep the Rainmaker in that annoying position. But for death stalling can be used in any situation where you want to stop the Rainmaker from resetting. So it can actually be used on offensive pushes. When I was talking about that Rainmaker in front of the team type strategy, if your team has a high DPS on the shield, let's say your team, like you push, let's say you get this checkpoint, your team's all here, you've popped the Rainmaker, but the enemy team is stalling you out successfully. You can't quite get the Rainmaker to grab it in a safe position and push forward. So the Rainmaker will start to reset, and what you might want to consider is for someone to grab the Rainmaker, even in a dangerous position, just so that the Rainmaker doesn't reset back to mid. This is really important for, it's not necessarily important for checkpoints, but let's say the team got to a 38 lead and the Rainmaker's right here, or maybe a 36 lead or something. So you might want to be trying to you're like the Rainmaker's so close to getting the lead and potentially getting you in that you don't want it to reset all the way to mid and lose all this ground that you covered. So having someone intentionally grab the Rainmaker with the intent to just stop it from resetting, not even necessarily trying to create a push out of it, can be valuable in some instances. As well, the actually this is pretty good spot. Death stalling can be done unintentionally by the defending team as well. So if you don't know, if you jump the Rainmaker off the map when you are in your half, so you're defending, if you jump the Rainmaker off the map, it will actually reset to mid. Here it doesn't do it because I'm in the opponent's half, but yeah, I could demonstrate straight real quick, but I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. And so for a defending team, let's say the lead, like let's say my team is trying to push, and we get lead by getting past this pillar on Rainmaker Scorch. The opposing team, in sort of desperate acts, might choose to dive for the Rainmaker to try to quickly jump it off the ledge, either jump it off the map, like resetting it, or they might, like, depending on the map, I don't know, let's say it was, let's say the Rainmaker was like all the way over here, and you're trying to push from this angle. The enemy team might choose to grab the Rainmaker and quickly jump it down here, resetting so much of your push, and stalling for a very significant amount of time. So the enemy team might grab the Rainmaker not necessarily with the intent to push, but just with the intent of resetting the Rainmaker in some way, and probably dying immediately after. However, if the defending team is successful in grabbing the Rainmaker, but isn't successful in dropping the Rainmaker off the ledge or resetting it off the map, and your team is able to splat them before they do that, the defending team can accidentally cause a death stall for the offensive team, and that's exceptionally dangerous because in that instance, instead of the offensive team having one player down due to them grabbing the Rainmaker and getting splattered, the defending team is one player down because they were the one that grabbed it. But that means that the offensive team has an extra player that can assist in popping the shield and or fighting and furthering the push into creating points. So it's something that is it's something that teams have to be aware of if they're attempting to reset the Rainmaker. Generally, I wouldn't. It's very rare that resetting the Rainmaker is actually like the optimal play. But in those instances where like you're trying to defend, a lead in the sort of last minute or something, and the enemy team has pushed very close to the lead, and you desperately need to defend it in any way you can. Resetting it off the map can be beneficial, but being cautious of that death stall is important for sure. Already been doing this for an hour. There's only a little bit more I want to talk about. I want to talk quickly about defense. Now, defense is, I've been talking quite often about how to push offensively, and it's something it's mainly because I've been thinking about how to create a good offensive push in Rainmaker. I mean, I've also been talking about stalling and stuff, but generally how I think about Rainmaker is if you can create a successful enough push and you have passable enough defense, then you can win the match. Defense is, on Rainmaker, it feels exceptionally difficult to get consistent. It's very much can feel sort of like a scramble to stop the Rainmaker sometimes, and as the defending team, you're at the mercy of the opposing team being in control of the Rainmaker and being in control of how they push, when they push, which specials they're pushing with, when, all those sorts of things that I've been talking about throughout this video. This idea of, if you're controlling the Rainmaker, you control the game. If you're not controlling the Rainmaker, you are at the mercy of whoever controls the Rainmaker. So defense can be quite shaky a lot of the time, but there are some things you can keep in mind when defending. So like obviously if you can just splat all your opponents, like that's awesome. But generally defense can come down to a game of trades. So a trade on the Rainmaker is actually really beneficial. Or can be really beneficial, sorry. Keep in mind there's niche cases with like QR and Tactical. But if I just trade the Rainmaker, I splat them, they splat me, that prevents the opponents from pushing for about 5 seconds, or however long it takes for them to pop and grab again. And typically teams will only have 1 or 2 players willing to grab the Rainmaker on a push. And so it can also stall it long enough for when the previous Rainmaker carrier respawns, and until they jump in and are able to grab the Rainmaker again. Which is, aside from QR, going to be the same time that it takes you to respawn after you trade. As well, especially if you trade, you don't give either team a numbers advantage when you do so. Additionally, using a special to trade, let's say you like pop Zuka and you go bam, but then you die to the Rainmaker, and you guys trade out, but you use your special to trade, is, I would generally say, is a net positive for your team, for the defending team, the team not in control of the Rainmaker, because the offending team already is at a special disadvantage. They have three players that can actively build special and use special because one of them is carrying the Rainmaker, whereas you have 4 players. And so trading not only a life and a special to stall the Rainmaker long enough for a repop and a possibly respawn I think is a net positive, because even if you use up a special, you then even on the special playing field, like you have 3 teammates up with access to their building special and getting special and using special, and the opponent team has that same sort of special access. So yeah, I think Rainmaker can generally tend to come down or can sometimes come down to a game of trades, because killing the Rainmaker is sort of crucial to stall, or at least putting some sort of lethal threat in front of the Rainmaker. Like I said before, with when I was discussing bombs, bombs are incredibly useful at defending, because you can spam choke points, you can throw them at range, and it's quite safe. Other tools like Toxic Mist. Toxic Mist in of itself doesn't really do anything, but Toxic Mist can slow down the Rainmaker and restrict its movements. So your some other lethal threat is more likely to splat the Rainmaker. And all of those, even if you don't get the kill with a lethal bomb or toxic mix, those utility options are good at stalling the Rainmaker from pushing, which is always good, because stalling the Rainmaker from pushing gives, if the enemy team has the Rainmaker, you get special advantage and gives your team time to respawn and get into good positions and all that sort of stuff. The last thing I wanted to mention is this idea of defending through sharking. Now sharking is very much a, I'm probably going to say this poorly, but it feels like a very much metagame aspect to Splatoon. It's very information based. Sharking only works if the opponents don't know you're there. And so sharking can do 2 things. I don't want to say can do 2 things. Here's how sharking works. In other modes, sharking isn't, it's good to get a splat, but it's not necessarily important to stopping the objective or controlling the objective in any way. But I think Rainmaker, it is quite a valuable thing. Let's say I'm trying to push this way, the right side of Scorch Rainmaker. If I've splatted most of the opponents and I'm C free advantage and I'm able to push forward, having someone shark near the Rainmaker path means that it's pretty much a free guarantee splat on the Rainmaker carrier, but also and a splat on the Rainmaker carrier stalls out the team's push. But also, if the Rainmaker is behind the team and the team is already pushed up and you splat the Rainmaker from behind, it now forces one of the enemy teams, even if you trade, it now forces one of the enemy teammates to come back for the Rainmaker and assist in repopping and grabbing it. So sharking can be incredibly useful in stalling the Rainmaker objective. As well, just you want to kind of balance, I'm not an expert in understanding all the niche cases of when is best to shark and not. But even the threat of a shark can be just as valuable as a shark itself. If the opponent isn't able to identify all the players on your team and their positions, and he's worried about a potential shark, like say behind a corner or something, they have to take time to clear that spot even if you're not necessarily sharking there. And that time it takes to clear those areas can be incredibly valuable. Like, again, Rainmaker is a game of milliseconds, seconds of milliseconds. So that extra time can be incredibly useful. It's quite difficult to manage information. I feel like it's quite a high level skill. It's very meta skill for sure. But if you are able to successfully manage the amount of information you give your opponents, that can mean that they are hesitant to push forward, which I think is most devastating in Rainmaker. There was something else I wanted to mention. Oh yeah, speaking of information, understanding where all your opponents are positioned. Again, Rainmaker is a game of positioning as well. Understanding where all your opponents are positioned can be incredibly valuable in recognizing when you can take breakaway opportunities, and when and where you can push. It's one of the skills that I find that I think I am fairly good at recognizing. I mean, it helps that I'm not like frontlining too much on support weapons. But let's say I recognize that, hey, they've got a charger, enemy team's got a charger on this, on Scorch Snipe. Let's say my teammate is fighting two people bottom left, and I have just come up and I've splattered the last guy on right here. I might recognize that opportunity and go, hey, there's two guys on the enemy team all the way off in no man's land, and they're not in front of the Rainmaker's checkpoint. I can quickly grab and gun it for the Rainmaker. Gun it for points, or a checkpoint, or whatever. Obviously that comes down to, like, the enemy probably made a mistake by having two people drop right and not be in front of the Rainmaker path ready to defend. But that, like, a play like that can in some ways be pulled off if the enemy team can't recognize that their position is poor, and that if you can recognize that their position is poor, you can take advantage of it by taking a breakaway. It's definitely something that I think you don't see at high level very often, because not only is like, just in general, high level players are better at managing their positioning, managing information, and so yeah, those sort of breakaway opportunities aren't as strong. But for like, I don't know, your average player, it might be a skill that can really turn the tides of the game, by recognizing enemy players' positions and capitalizing off of it. Oh gosh, I've still got maybe like 2 more points to talk about. So one of the things, oh yeah, I'll mention them briefly. One of the things I want to talk about was checkpoint staggering. So with the checkpoints in this game, I'm actually gonna reset the checkpoint real quick. With checkpoints in this game, checkpoints are the only way for a Rainmaker carrier in the match to drop the Rainmaker without dying. And it's not the only way they can drop the Rainmaker without losing the special, because Cooler exists. But you can think of it as, if I successfully dunk the Rainmaker at a checkpoint, I retain all my specials and I've dropped the Rainmaker. So what you can do with that is, let's say you use a special to secure this checkpoint, like your teammate uses one. Then you've just dunked the Rainmaker on the checkpoint, and now you have your special. You had it before, you grabbed the Rainmaker, but you weren't able to use it, right? Now that you've successfully dunked the Rainmaker, you can, you're now free to use your special to extend the push. And say your teammate that used their special to initiate the push can now grab because they don't have special anymore. So this idea of like checkpoint staggering is that like a checkpoint gives you a free reset. The other way you can look at it, or the like other dynamic of it is, if I have this respawn, the Rainmaker has a timer, right? And let's say it's overtime and I'm trying to make a push. I need lead. I've only got 40 seconds now, where I can effectively get lead. However, if you haven't broken checkpoint yet, you only need those 60 seconds to get to the checkpoint, because once you get to the checkpoint, you're able to reset that timer. It's like the only instance of overtime where a Rainmaker carrier can go from carrying the Rainmaker to not carrying the Rainmaker and the match to not end. Now it's very rare that you will achieve an overtime where you haven't already gotten the checkpoint, but it comes up in sort of rare cases, and it's most important for the defending team to keep in mind, because the defending team in overtime might just be playing to stall the Rainmaker timer, but if the checkpoint is not there, then the enemy team actually has a way to reset, the offending team, has a way to reset the Rainmaker timer. So yeah, it's something to keep in mind. It's not like a big strategy thing, but yeah, it's just an interesting dynamic. I feel like there was one last thing that I wanted to talk about, but if I can't remember it, I will end the video. Yeah, okay, I can't quite remember it, but yeah, those are my general thoughts on like how I'm thinking about Rainmaker, especially at the moment. I haven't really like talked about specific specials or like ways to push with specific specials or specific weapons. I've just talked about the Rainmaker main weapon a lot, and like the dynamics of surrounding the objective, because that's how I think about it. I think about play a lot, especially as I'm a supportive. At the moment, I play supportive ends up quite often. So my impact on the game is quite minimal, especially with tactical. I'm not necessarily the one getting a lot of kills. I'm not necessarily the one always frontlining. I'm generally one to play objective. And so thinking about how I can abuse the objective to win matches is something I find myself doing quite often. And I think it's a skill that I've developed quite well. It's something I want to continue to develop. But I think it's a skill that a lot of people haven't developed. And a lot of people, like, they'll grab the Rainmaker, they don't know what to do. Yeah, hopefully that gives some insight. I'm sure there's a lot more things I could talk about. But I think I've talked about Rainmaker enough for one day. But yeah, if you're curious on, or if you have any of your own thoughts, feel free to comment or chat about it with me. I love to hear how people think about modes and stuff. As well, if you would like to see maybe a part 2 on this, I might be able to think about. I've got some other thoughts that I haven't included in this. As well, if you would like a video on going through each map mode and understanding effective ways the Rainmaker can push and good stalling spots and stuff like that, I'm happy to go through those. I've also been prompted with the idea of an talking about the double blob strategy. and a bit more nuance than that. It's not something that I have experimented with too much, but there's lots more we could talk about. So yeah, I think that's it. Thanks for watching.